Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and remember to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon. What if the Cybertruck would not be made at the new Giga Texas facility? In case you didn't quite understand what Elon said, the Cybertruck isn't likely to be launched until sometime next year or possibly longer. Now, given the rate at which the existing fab at Giga Texas was constructed, there would be enough time around now to start building a Cybertruck fab in time for the Cybertruck launch. Now this would mean the entire Giga Texas could be used for building Model Ys, or possibly some Model 3s too. Elon just said no new models. Anyway, the footprint of Giga Texas is about 4 times the size of the Shanghai Model Y factory. It's also hosted on multiple floors with an overall 7-story height, thus giving it a much larger volume than Shanghai. And remember, Elon talks about volumetric efficiencies, or the whole 3D chess analogy in literal application, 3D manufacturing. This is amazing. This could mean that Texas is probably over 10 times the volume size building than Giga Shanghai Model Y line. Now, we've witnessed Model Ys come out of Shanghai as fast as every 33 seconds, which is close to 1 million a year. Texas is using new manufacturing processes, front and rear die casts, 300 fewer robots than Shanghai, and look at the difference Shanghai has made just with the rear diecast molds, along with other processes like the seats attached to the battery pack and likely new paint systems. Alright, so if Shanghai can do 1 million a year, does that mean Texas should be capable of over 10 million? Or even more due to the fact we're using improved processes and have learned so much since and from Shanghai? Could it not therefore be even more efficient per cubed foot? 10 million does sound outrageous, but it does make 4 million sound more plausible. A lot of people generally speculate about 2 million a year capacity for the current fab, but there isn't really too much basis on this, especially when you factor in the run rates we've seen in Shanghai. Don't get me wrong either, 2 million capacity is also great for Texas. But Elon said, the more you work on a production line, the faster you can get it, as if there is no limit. But over $10 billion, eventual total spend at the Texas site alone, and this building only costing just over $1 billion, even if we raise all total capex to $2 billion on what we have now, then we would still expect 5 times more expansion to come. Granted, some of it could equally be for energy, but those will still be factories that will be contributing to Tesla's profit too. Perhaps demand is just too insane to add more complexity with more models. It doesn't progress the mission further. Tesla still have enough demand from just the Model Y and the 3. They are exceptional cars, and they're about to get so much better. My Model 3 performance is already so amazing. With structural battery pack, front and rear diecast molds, 4680 batteries, and all the other new additions, then it would be unimaginable. I think I would have to sell my current Tesla and buy this new version as soon as it was available. Texas will of course start off with the Model Y long range and performance, but rather than introducing another line for a standard range when they need more demand, I think they might add another line for a Model 3 long range and performance. FYI, I don't expect to see a Model Y standard range in the US for quite some time still, likely using Tesla's own LFP batteries and reaching a range of at least 260 miles. Why would Tesla wait so long to sell standard Model Ys in the US, rather than adding more Model Y variants, as Model Ys are so popular? Well, just because Ys are so popular, don't downplay the 3s. There would be a lot more profit in 4680 3s too, and a lot more profit on a long-range 3 than a standard Model Y, not to mention how much a standard Model Y will cannibalize the long-range Model Y sales. Don't downplay the Model 3 just because the Model Y has taken so much popularity. Just because the Y will sell millions doesn't mean the 3 won't. The Model 3 is becoming the biggest selling vehicle in many markets, not the Model Y. The Model Y is of course highly popular, as is the SUV crossover vehicle. Also, the Model Y was able to be sold at a higher price point and thus produce more profit. The Model 3 will be able to be produced a lot cheaper at Texas though, and thus will have also a lot higher margin. So what I'm saying is it's not Model Ys that Tesla want to sell from Texas. It's long-range and performance models. These are the vehicles with the highest profit margin, especially when we're using 4680 batteries. I expect Tesla to ramp up the Model Y performance and long-range on one production line, and the next production line to be a Model 3 with performance and long-range. Now, why would consumers want a Model 3 over a Model Y? Well, the 3 is lighter and smaller, so it's going to be a better driver's car. It will also be quicker and have more range, and of course cost less than the Model Y. If it's range, performance, or value for money you want, then the Model 3 is going to be better over the Y, but mainly because it would be a lower cost vehicle. What if the new Model 3 long range actually had a range of 400 miles too? Only a 20% increase from what it has today. And what if the new Model 3 performance went 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds? That is a serious upgrade on performance. Is it possible Tesla could make 1 million of these Model 3 long-range performances in Texas alone and sell them all domestically? Well, what if the price dropped a little if necessary to eventually match the demand? Or would the demand be high enough already? In case you didn't realize, the reason the factory will only be producing 3 and Y is because Tesla can make more vehicles focusing on fewer models, and the demand is that high. Yes, the demand is already that high for Tesla's electric vehicles, but what is going to happen when Tesla sell their autonomous vehicles? Feature complete FSD, what will the demand be then? Will the demand for self-driving vehicles be even higher again than the demand for electric vehicles? Are people willing to buy Teslas on the sole basis that they just drive themselves, and the fact it is an EV is only the secondary factor of moving to a Tesla? What if there are going to be so many Model 3s and Ys in the US alone that there is enough supply for a sufficient robotaxi network already without having to resort to the compact model? On top of that, imagine if these vehicles become money makers for people as well, and people buy them as an investment. I am still uncertain about how the pricing will go when this occurs. Think about it. Suddenly perhaps your vehicle can generate $25,000 a year from robotaxiing. How much is that worth to you? There's some work involved in cleaning, maintaining, storing and charging the car, but perhaps this is worth $100,000 to you, yet the car may only cost $40,000. This is a huge discrepancy. However, at the same time, there are only so many robotaxis that are required. I estimate it might be as low as 2 million in the US, but even if it's 5 million, there might eventually be 20 or 30 Teslas in the US. Therefore, the robotaxi supply should saturate, which then makes you wonder what will become of robotaxis. Will the prices of them drop to meet the extra supply, i.e. $25,000 a year turns into just $10,000 a year, and then a $100,000 asset only drops around $50,000, which ironically is about the price of a standard Model 3 with FSD. On the other hand, demand for robotaxis will likely be much higher than for the likes of Uber, so perhaps a market clearing price will eventually be set. Maybe demand would be that crazy for autonomous Teslas. Could that Texas factory really produce 10 million vehicles a year? I think Tesla would probably need a standard range version perhaps. And as I say, this needs to be done with Tesla's in-house LFP batteries. But what if they're still a couple of years away, hitting volume production, and there's all this extra potential capacity in this new factory not being utilized? Well, what if Tesla actually bring out a standard range version using 4680 batteries in the meantime? If Tesla really crank out 4680 batteries, they're still the best used in vehicles to get the highest value. If Tesla's run rate of their 4680 batteries far exceeds the demand for long range and performance versions, is it possible to consider that they may offer standard range of 4680s? I'm not sure, but the plan is definitely changing as we are seeing Tesla somewhat double down on 3 and Y. All possible CATL are able to ramp up even more LFP batteries in the meantime for Tesla to sell the standard range Model 3 from Texas. That would really take a lot of batteries. The ironic thing is though that Tesla would likely be paying more for CATL's batteries than their own 4680s. So I would say this would be avoided, as it will also cannibalize some of the long range sales. Therefore, I expect only 4680 vehicles from Texas until Tesla have actually started producing their own LFP batteries. I just wonder if Tesla will use 4680s in the standard range. We had previously assumed that 4680s were more earmarked for the likes of Cybertruck, but if Tesla can release more vehicles by selling a standard range 3 and Y with 4680 batteries, then that will likely get more vehicles produced, and there will be the demand for these standard models. Or perhaps the Model 3 standard range will use LFP batteries, as the range is still adequate, and then the standard Model Y may use 4680s, and be able to generate a reasonable amount of range compared to the Shanghai standard Model Y, which likely doesn't have a sufficient enough range for the US market. Tesla could decide on what range they wanted to offer, likely somewhere between 250 and 270 miles. The margin just wouldn't be anywhere near as high, as the car would be at $5,000 cheaper, but only perhaps a $1,000 lower cost in batteries. That's $4,000 less profit margin per sale, so perhaps that's not the way either. Is it possible that maybe the prices will simply come down and it makes sense to sell a Model Y long range at $50,000 eventually, rather than introduce a lower cost model? The point of the standard range version is that it can use LFP batteries, as that makes for a huge saving in battery. However, Tesla's 4680 batteries are already at a lower cost than CATL's LFP batteries, so it does cause some dilemmas. But according to Elon's timeline, FSD will be ready this year, and this will be the largest increase in asset valuation the world has ever seen, implying so much value added to these vehicles, which is another way of saying a high increase in demand. So much so that perhaps it's possible for the next 2 years Tesla will have enough demand for Texas at full capacity, selling just Model Y and Model 3 long range and performance, making absolutely massive margins. The question is full capacity 4 million or 10 million vehicles a year. We hear Berlin will have a 250 gigawatt hours a year battery production line. Well, Texas is a lot bigger than Berlin. It will possibly have more battery production capabilities. 250 gigawatt hours is enough for likely 4 million vehicles a year. This has changed the business a lot. Okay, as a consumer, this may not be great. No new exciting Teslas coming, just Model 3 and Y for the time being. Of course, along with the higher end X and S. Yeah, nothing much exciting on the horizon in the way of new models. Nothing more affordable coming anytime soon either. Maybe even the opposite. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.